So today I want to talk about what special education actually means. And this is a term, of course, special education that we use all the time, but we're really going to get into the fine small details of what special education means. And you'll have to excuse me because I'm going to be reading a lot from my notes today, so I'll be looking off from the screen a few times. But I really want to get into the precise definitions of what special education means. So let's just read a basic definition here. Special education means specially designed instruction provided at no cost to the parents that is intended to meet the unique needs of a child with a disability, including instruction conducted in the classroom, in the home, in hospitals and institutions, and in other settings, and instruction in physical education. This also includes speech language services, travel training, and vocational education. So we're going to unpack all of this little by little. I mean, this is what us lawyers do. This is kind of why actually we're a little bit annoying, although my wife would say a lot annoying, is because we take words that are seemingly simple and we kind of complicate them. But this is important because if you ever get into a debate with the school about what is needed for your child, you really want to be able to understand everything to the same level that they do and perhaps even that their lawyers do. So I really want to focus on a very critical term here, and that is unique needs. The most important aspect of special education is the recognition by schools that every special education child is unique. You may have a program that works for every general education student at your school. Great, that doesn't mean it works for all the special education students. Maybe you even have a program that works for the vast majority of special education students, but not for a handful of them. That means that you have to modify your program for that handful of students. Maybe you even have 100 special education students in a building, and 99 of them are in this program that's working great for them. But if that one doesn't have a program that's working great for him and her, then the program needs to be modified for that kid. That doesn't mean that the school changes its entire program for one kid. That's not special education. What it means is that it takes its general program and tailors it to the needs, to the unique needs of each special education student. This is critical to recognize. Now, a great debate has taken place over what specially designed instruction actually means, and this is going to depend on what perspective you're coming from. If you're at a school, then you're going to try to interpret its specially designed instruction in a way that is oftentimes as limited as possible. And one of the reasons for that is because it simply it simply costs a great deal of money and effort often to provide services to special needs kids. Them's the breaks. That's just the way it's going to be. Now, if you're a parent, of course, you're going to look at this differently. And I would encourage you to read specially designed instruction in a much more broad way, because really, I think that's the way it's actually written in the law, and that's the way it's been interpreted by courts. Specially designed instruction has a pretty expansive meaning. Okay? Now, specially designed instruction means adapting as appropriate to the needs of an eligible child, the content, the methodology, or delivery of instruction. One, to address the child's unique needs resulting from the disability, and two, ensuring the child's access to the general curriculum so that the child can meet the educational standards that apply to all children within the jurisdiction of the public agency. Now, what this means, in essence, is that schools are required to modify what and how they teach based on the individual needs of each special education student, to an extent that allows that student to access the general education curriculum as much as a student who doesn't have special needs. Now, this doesn't mean that everyone is going to perform at the same level. It simply means that everyone should have access to the same instruction. So let's say that there is a math class, for example, and there are 28 general education students in there and 2 special education students. And there's going to be a curriculum in there. And let's say 28 of those students are learning algebra. Fine, that's not a problem. Now, let's say you have a couple of students in there who are severely cognitively impacted. Okay, they're have a very low IQ for whatever reason, whether it's uh, they were born with a low IQ or whether there was a traumatic brain injury. But either way, there's really not as much usefulness in teaching them algebra. However, they still have to access math because there is usefulness there. Okay, they may be taught, for example, how to just use a calculator. They may be taught how to count change. They may be taught how to work with prices. Okay, so no, they're not going to be performing algebra or geometry to the same level as a general education kid may be in that instance, but still they have to have access to the math curriculum, and that access can only take place if the special education or if the program is modified in order to address their unique needs. And now it is critical to understand that the responsibility of schools to design special instruction does not end with academics. This is very important. And I've discussed this before in a previous video. Sometimes schools will believe, well, we're delivering academic instruction, that's really all the kid needs. It's much more complicated than that. Specially designed instruction also must include educational instruction specially designed to meet the unique needs of the handicapped child, supported by such services as are necessary to permit the child to benefit from the instruction. These unique needs include social, health, emotional, physical, and vocational needs. And I use the term their handicapped child because that was actually pulled from the law. Right now we use disabled child or special education child, but when the law was written it was a different vocabulary. In any case, it's really important actually to ensure that any program is going to look at the child as a whole. Okay, we all have social needs, we have health needs, we have emotional needs, we have physical needs, we have vocational needs. And to simply stop services to a kid once the academic needs have been addressed is really ignoring the rest of the child. Now, different outcomes should be expected for different students depending on their abilities. This is completely normal, okay? There is not a one-size-fits-all for a disability. Let's say you take a student, for example, who has ADHD. Some kids are going to be mildly ADHD, and they may not need too many accommodations in order to perform at the same level as their general education peers. Other students may be severely ADHD, and they may need a lot more interventions and assistance in order to perform at the same level as their non-disabled peers. Again, the key term here is unique needs. Every kid is different, and the program is going to have to be modified, and the instruction is going to have to be modified for every kid. And how the extent to which that takes place really depends on the kid. It does not depend on what the school actually wants to provide or the resources that the school has. That does not matter. It's really based on the kid. Now let's take a look at this language of no cost. And again, this is where us lawyers can be very annoying because most people read no cost and say, okay, no cost is no cost. But of course, it's a bit more complicated when we're talking about the law. Schools, first of all, may charge for what's known as incidental fees. And those are fees that are equally charged to disabled and non-disabled students. For example, some schools have materials fees. They may charge $25 or $30 every year to all students. That is considered to be acceptable under the law. What a school may not do, however, is charge parents for services that it is required to provide itself. So for example, some health services. Let's say you have a kid who has to have medication every day at 1 o'clock. And let's say the kid can't administer the medication to him or herself. So you might need a medical professional, or you might need someone trained to actually administer it. And the school says, well, no, we're not going to do it. Mom or dad, you have to come down here and you have to do it. The school cannot do something like that because then it is shifting costs over to the parents because parents are incurring costs and coming down in the middle of the day. Instead, what the school is going to have to do is go ahead and either contract with a medical professional or properly train one of its staff to actually administer those medications. That's simply the way it works. Another issue, this comes up quite a bit actually. I've represented a lot of kids with substantial behavioral needs, whether because of ADHD or depression, anxiety, or oppositional defiant disorder, or some other issue that's going on. Now, some schools will say, okay, well, we don't want to deal with this kid today, but we're not going to suspend this kid either. So they're going to get on the phone, mom, dad, come on down, pick up your kid. It does not work that way. Either the kid is under suspension, and there are limits for how long you can suspend a kid, and I'll get to that in other videos, but either the kid is under suspension or that kid has to be in school. You can't just call the parents down to pick up a kid when the kid is acting out. No, at that point, the school has to figure it out. Okay, they may have to bring in a specialist, or they may have to go to a more positive behavior support system, or with some kids who are especially maybe violent or engaging in harm to others or to themselves, they may need a padded room. Or sometimes, if the school can't handle them at all, then the school's going to have to pay for a private placement elsewhere. But what the school cannot do is wash its hands of the situation and simply say, mom, dad, you come deal with this. No, this is the school's responsibility. The law makes this very, very clear. Now, let's look at physical education. Now, in the baseline, the most basic way, physical education could just mean that. It could literally mean gym. But that's not really exactly how it is in the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Physical education actually refers to motor fitness, motor skills, fine skills that students may have to develop. Even some students actually have a great deal of difficulty with body control. So that's something that physical education would have to include. This is why, for example, some schools will have to provide occupational therapy to students. Travel training, again, we're not, in some respects, it's kind of the way that we, travel means what we would use in common language, but this is also a term of art and idea. So here we're talking about assisting students to develop an awareness of the environment in which they live and learn skills necessary to move from place to place within an environment such as school, home, or in the community. So for example, okay, I've represented a couple of students now with a very rare condition that makes it impossible for them to feel physical pain. That means that they may not know when they've been severely injured, so they have to be especially cautious in their environments. So the school's going to have to assist them with that process. The same thing would apply to blind kids or students who are hard of hearing. This is when schools have to assist students in recognizing some of the dangers in their environment so that they can properly interact in their environment. Finally, let's talk about vocational education. And vocational education, for the most part, is just that, okay? It refers to the preparation of students for unpaid work or for work in a career that doesn't require a college degree. Many special education students do go on to college and oftentimes do very, very well. I've represented some students who were special needs who were finishing at the top of their class and were just doing an outstanding job in college as well. But that's not every student. Some schools or some students are going to be much better fits for some kind of a vocational program. So schools may satisfy this requirement through a number of ways, up to and including classroom education. Let's say, what we used to call woodshop, for example, or an auto mechanics program. Or there could be volunteering opportunities that are presented to students, or internships, or credit for working. Let's say, that you have a special needs kid who is working outside of school, earning a living. They should be able to get credit too. However, if a school is providing the vocational education itself, so for example, if it has some kind of a program that it offers to a lot of other kids, it has to ensure that its programs are reasonably calculated to enable each special education student to develop the vocational skills needed to be successful after high school. So, for example, if the school is saying, well, we have a vocational program, it's great. We have an auto mechanics program, but you have a kid who really has a great deal of problems exercising proper control over their arms. Then that auto mechanics program is not necessarily going to work. And again, this doesn't mean that the school has to go and start a whole other program. But it has to make modifications somehow, whether it can make those modifications in another classroom or in the auto mechanics program, or provide some volunteering opportunities, or provide some off-site opportunities. all of that is on the table really for the school. But again, it's really important to recognize that when we're talking about special education, it's so important to recognize that we're always talking about services beyond academics. It should not be that limiting. And also always remember that programs must be tailored to the unique needs of every special education student. So that's it for today. Thank you and goodbye.